Thank you all for joining. We'll get started. We know people will be coming in, but for those as well who have colleagues yet to join, this will be recorded and you'll be able to reshare this recording. So first, a warm welcome to our webinar, Faiths for Ocean Conservation, Mobilizing for the 2025 UN Ocean Conference. My name is Tariq Al-Alimi. I'm calling in today from the island of Bahrain. I'm very deeply honored to be your host today as we explore the intersection of faith, stewardship, and ocean protection. And as we're gathering here today virtually from across the globe, I want to begin by acknowledging first that for many of us, for many of faith traditions represented here today, water is sacred. It is a source of life, source of purification, a source of renewal. From the baptismal waters to ritual ablutions, from creation stories to flood narratives, we know that the sacred nature of water is woven into our spiritual heritage. And oceans, covering over 70% of the planet, represent the ultimate expression of this sacred element. It is what connects all of us through currents that know no borders, with marine life that recognizes no political boundaries, and a shared climate system that affects every single living being. Yet we know today, and presume as well, you know this and showing up to this call, our oceans face unprecedented threats, from pollution, overfishing, habitat destruction to acidification, and also, I know well, warming waters. And we know that it's not just faith traditions that acknowledge us, it's also indigenous leaders and groups who do. And we also acknowledge Terea or Te Mauna, which is the voice of the ocean, a powerful call to action from all the Pacific indigenous leaders who are mobilizing around the Oceans Conference as well. And their understanding of Te Mauna as ancestor and home, their emphasis on reciprocity with the ocean, their view on marine spaces is something that I know that complements all the spiritual truths that complement faith traditions worldwide as well. And here at Faith for UNOC3, which is a multi-faith campaign supported by the Bloomberg Ocean Initiative and Ocean5, aims to position faith voices at the heart of ocean protection efforts. This particular campaign is dedicated to ensuring religious leaders not only influence international policy frameworks, but also drive the implementation of equitable and inclusive marine conservation strategies. So we know as well that our moral voices together, our community networks, and our capacity to inspire action across generations positions us to do quite unique work in this space that for some we know showing up on the call, and I can see those in the Zoom chat you've been doing for the past years and decades. And for some, this is the very first time really putting yourself in a position to do this work. And today we're very fortunate to be guided by exceptional speakers who will guide our conversation and also to give you a background on this work. Jonathan Kelsey, who's the director of the Bloomberg Ocean Fund, Iyad Abu Mokhli, who's the founder and director of the Faith for Ocean Coalition at UNOC3 Environment, Martha Jarvis, who's the UN representative for the Anglican Communion, and Elisiva Sunya from the Anglican Church of Polynesia. And I'm also joined today by my colleagues, who many of you also know well, Gopal Patel and Wesley Cocozello, who are also part of the Faith for UNOC3 coordination team. And together, we'll share ways as well at the end how we can get engaged collectively in the campaign. So first, I'd love to hand it over to you, Jonathan, if I may. Jonathan Kelsey, again, is the director of the Bloomberg Ocean Fund. We're very generously and with their pioneering leadership in supporting this work. Jonathan, you've been instrumental in advocating for ocean conservation globally. You have, I think, the most knowledge collectively of all of us, perhaps on marine policy and also conservation finance in this area. And I wonder, Jonathan, as we look towards UNOC3 in Nice this June, could you share with us some of the key policy priorities for the conference? And also, if you could share, why is it important for the Bloomberg Oceans Fund to be engaging faith communities, and why have you really supported this work? Jonathan, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Tariq. Tariq, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Amazing. I'm gonna try to make this work here. Why? Let me see if I can further give you a better picture. What are you all seeing right now? Are you seeing a presentation
Ocean
view? Or
policy objectives. Yes.
okay, just as a
Directly.
slide. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Tariq and Gopal and everyone. It's really a great opportunity to be here today, and I certainly really value and appreciate the work of your group and of the broader faiths community in advocating for ocean health and resilience outcomes that are so desperately needed. I'm Jonathan Kelsey, as Tariq said. I'm the director of the Bloomberg Ocean Fund. I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C. in Annapolis, Maryland. And the Bloomberg Ocean Fund is a regranting partner of the Bloomberg Ocean Initiative. We implement a strategy with our Bloomberg Ocean Fund partners that is aimed threefold at helping to improve the health and resilience of the ocean for the people that depend on the ocean for their lives and livelihoods, as well as for the climate and the biodiversity that are also implicit in the broader ocean ecosystem and connectivity of the global system that is our planet that we all live on. The three areas that we focus specifically on, although the policy objectives I'll talk about are somewhat broader, are first helping the world achieve protection of high priority biodiversity areas through the establishment of marine protected areas and other effective area-based management measures that help to move forward and advance the achievement of the global target to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030 that was laid out in the global biodiversity framework under the Convention on Biological Diversity that was established, that was passed, agreed, adopted in late 2022. We also focus significantly on ending illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and improving democratization of information about fishing to the public, to various stakeholder groups to ensure accountability and equity and responsibility and sustainability in global fisheries, whether at coastal levels or at international and high seas levels. And then we also focus a lot of our effort on protecting some of the most vulnerable marine ecosystems, coral reefs around the world, and stopping harmful practices and other impacts that degrade climate coral reefs that are especially resilient to climate change. So with that, I wanted to jump in. I think Tariq mentioned some of the key points about the ocean and why we care about the ocean. The ocean is life, not only for life in the ocean, but for the life around the ocean that depends on it. The ocean shelters us from the effects of climate change, absorbs a significant amount of the heat generated by humans. Mangroves, forests, seagrass, salt marshes store significant amounts of carbon. In fact, per unit area, more than terrestrial forests. More than a quarter of marine species rely on healthy coral reef ecosystems as part of their life cycles. More than 3 billion people depend on fish as a significant source of protein. And in fact, that same number, more than 3 billion, depend on the ocean for basic food and economic income, whether that's through subsistence fisheries or other aspects of use of ocean resources. And we have significant impacts to the ocean that Tariq started to mention. For example, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing costs the global seafood industry as much as $50 billion annually. And in fact, these illegal activities and unsustainable management of fisheries robs local communities and beneficiaries of these economic environmental services of these resources and puts the money and the benefit in the pockets of a few, as opposed to feeding the people that are closest to these resources. So we care significantly about the ocean for so many different reasons, and that's why we're working so hard to try to protect the ocean and create equitable solutions for the people that depend on it. This is a big year for the ocean. Some are calling it a super year for the ocean. Maybe it wouldn't be the first super year, but it is definitely a super year for the ocean. Starting with a big event in the run-up to the UN Ocean Conference that happened just a couple of weeks ago in Paris, called SOS for the Ocean. And this was France's work to begin to build ambition and expectations around what can be delivered in June in Nice. In just a couple of weeks, we have the Our Ocean Conference, which is an annual conference that was started in 2014 by then Secretary John Kerry, to really deliver announcements, commitments to protect the ocean from governments around the world. This is a significant moment, and we'll be participating in that. And then, of course, we have the June UN Ocean Conference, which is the target for this first bit of work that we're partnering with you all on, and we're very excited to see that conference taking shape. There are other moments coming up, of course, that will feature oceans prominently. The IUCN World Conservation Congress will take place in October of 2025 of this year in UAE, in Dubai. And then in November, we'll have the climate COP being held in Brazil. So we see a real opportunity to really raise the ambition around oceans and connect and build a narrative across these different moments. So what are we trying to accomplish across these different moments? First of all, I mentioned the global 30 by 30 target, and this is a real important piece of work, a high priority policy objective that the world is rallying around. And this is about protecting ocean biodiversity in the most important places, and not just within national waters and not just in those blue spaces of the ocean, but from coastal areas where biodiversity feeds and supports the livelihoods of billions of people, into national waters where you have large marine megafauna and industrial fisheries that are important, to the high seas that make up more than 50% of the planet and roughly 2/3 of our ocean area. So taking a very inclusive approach to protecting the ocean is important. And while we have many mechanisms in national waters, including coastal areas, to create and enable marine protection, on the high seas, we're working now to bring into force the High Seas Treaty, or the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, that was agreed and adopted by the UN in 2023, but has yet to enter into force. We're working to get 60 countries to ratify that treaty to have it enter into force. This will give us the tool for creating MPAs on the high seas. So we need to be thinking broadly about how we are reaching the 30% goal. And this isn't just about getting to 30%. It's about making sure that the protection and management regimes within the areas that we're establishing have the right management and regulations to effectively protect the biodiversity that's within these areas, and provide the kind of benefits, including economic and fishery benefits, that they're designed and intended to ensure. In doing this, it's also really critical that we are upholding the rights and the tenure and the consent of indigenous peoples who have, as we know, been managing these areas through traditional means time immemorial, and need to make sure that they're engaged, and their management and protection through indigenous protected areas and ITTs are upheld in this global initiative. And then finally, other local communities have a strong role to make and ensure to play in ensuring that coastal areas are well protected, and that they are deeply engaged in the governance decision making around how areas are set up and managed, and that they have continued opportunity to access the resources that they so closely depend on. So 30 by 30 is a major initiative that we're focused on. It's also one of the key priorities for the UN Ocean Conference. I also talked a little bit about fisheries, and a key area for policy work that is needed is really around improving fisheries transparency, accountability, and management. We know that illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing robs local beneficiaries and dependent users and communities of the kinds of economic and nutritional and development needs that they have. And so it's really important that we take a strong stand to end these kinds of illicit practices. And that includes cracking down on the very harsh reality that much of the fishing activity that takes place, especially on the high seas, but in national waters as well, is impinging on the rights, both labor and human rights, of the people that are involved in the workforce. And there's a lot of tragedy and really despicable stories of what's happening, and we need to raise up those stories and make sure that there are policies in place that address these human rights and labor issues. Also, within the context of fisheries, we're really seeing the need to improve the rights, equity, and justice for small-scale fishers and coastal dependent communities. There's considerable injustice that's happening in the conflict between industrial fishers and coastal dependent communities and their fisheries. And in particular, there are reduction fisheries taking place around the world where small fisheries stocks are being used for fish meal and fish oil and being exported from the communities that actually need those fisheries and fish stocks for their nutrition and development. And so there's considerable opportunity to improve the equity and justice and access for small-scale fisheries to the fishery resources that they're dependent on. And then finally, within the context of this, more and more information is needed to be made available to the public. And there are a number of different policies that are outlined in a charter that the Coalition for Fisheries Transparency has set up with 10 principles for improving public access to fishing information. And that's a really important piece of work that needs to take place and will be a focus of the UN Ocean Conference. The next slide I just want to talk a little bit about is ensuring that we're within the confines of our fisheries work and also area-based protection work under 30 by 30, that we're targeting and protecting the most vulnerable and important habitats like coral reefs, and ensuring that we're ending destructive fishing practices like bottom trawling. In deep ocean areas, we're banning deep sea mining that can have irreversible effects on the most vulnerable deep sea ecosystems. That we're making sure that we're including corals and other sensitive and keystone habitats in protected areas and are planning for achieving 30 by 30. And of course, that in addition to the direct physical impacts from these kinds of activities, we're taking the right management steps to prevent and curtail pollution from land sources and at sea discharges. And the last piece I'll mention is that the ocean has lots of challenges that it's facing from uses that are counterproductive to the resilience and health of this vast ecosystem. But at the same time, the ocean is an opportunity for just transition to climate protection, and that ocean-based climate solutions can deliver as much as 35% of the greenhouse gas emission cuts that we need by 2050 to limit global temperature rise. And so we have a number of policy objectives within our broader funder community that include scaling ocean-based renewable energy, and especially offshore wind, decarbonizing ocean-based transport, and then many of the conserving and restoring coastal and marine ecosystem priorities that I've spoken about already, and other important ways that we can use the ocean to achieve our climate goals, including by reducing offshore oil and gas exploration and development. So I want to just stop there and leave you with these set of priorities that we're targeting in terms of our ocean protection policy work, and see if there are any questions, number one, but just also draw this back to where we've all started, that we see this year as a huge opportunity to press for really progressive, new, and improved policies on this variety of issues. And we think that this is not just a government or NGO, civil society kind of effort. This is an all hands on deck effort. And we think that the faith community has a really critical role to play in helping to deliver ocean resilience and health and equitable and just solutions for the people that depend on the ocean. And we're really pleased to be working with you all, and hope that together we can see really positive and impressive outcomes in the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that really comprehensive overview, and there will be time for questions at the end. And we'll also try to get all of the information as well that you shared to the participants in many different forms, and I'll share that as well as we close. Would love to maybe just transition from where you ended, because it's, I think, perfect time to hand it over to Dr. Iyad Abu-Makhli, who founds and directs the Faith for Earth Coalition at the UN Environment Programme. Not a stranger to many of you on this call for his pioneering work at the intersection of faith and environmental action. And Dr. Iyad, I wonder if you could help us understand how ocean conservation, one, fits within the broader planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, which I know many on this call are active in, and also how faith teachings across different traditions might guide a response to these interconnected challenges. Dr. Iyad, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tariq, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you and with distinguished speakers and colleagues in the audience. And I'm delighted to provide some reflections on the importance of the 2025 UN Oceans Conference, which represents a really critical milestone in global efforts to protect and restore the health of our oceans, which are essential to sustaining life on Earth. In UNEP, we recognize that healthy oceans are the foundation for a thriving planet, and their conservation is indispensable for achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, particularly SDG 14, which is life below water. So why UNOC3 matters? First of all, it is a turning point for ocean action. The conference is a key opportunity to accelerate the implementation of global commitments on ocean governance, particularly in the wake of landmark agreements such as the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, known as BBNJ. Agreement. UNEP sees this conference as a pivotal moment to move from commitments to measurable actions that enhance marine biodiversity, reduce pollution, and strengthen climate resilience. So touching upon the three planetary crises or environmental crises. Second, it is important to strengthen multilateral cooperation, which is currently under threat. The challenges facing our oceans, plastic pollution, biodiversity loss, and acidification, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, as mentioned by Jonathan, are global in nature and require collaborative solutions. In UNEP, we support an integrated governance approach that brings together governments, international organizations, civil society, indigenous communities, and the private sector to drive ocean-positive policies and initiatives. The third point of the importance is advancing the Global Plastic Treaty and pollution reduction. The ongoing negotiations, as you know, for a legally binding global plastic treaty provides a major opportunity to curb marine plastic pollution at its source. So UNEP is committed to supporting the finalization and effective implementation of this treaty and the number of INC conferences that have been held so far are going towards that. So the solutions towards a circular, just and inclusive economy, particularly for coastal and small island developing states. And of course, you, Tariq, in Bahrain, can attest to the importance of that, which, all of these pollution actions or inactions are affecting small island states. The fourth point is, or of the importance of the conference, is to harness the science and innovation. Science-based policymaking is at the heart of UNEP's mission. And UNOC3 serves as a platform to highlight the latest scientific assessments, including UNEP's work on ocean climate interactions, the blue carbon ecosystems, and sustainable blue economies. Strengthening the ocean science policy interface will be critical in ensuring that governance decisions are informed by the best available data and indigenous knowledge. And the fifth point of the importance is aligning the ocean and climate action. The ocean climate action nexus cannot be overstated across the knowledge that oceans absorb over 90% of excess heat from global warming and are central to climate regulation. So UNEP urges countries to integrate ocean-based solutions such as marine protected areas, nature-based solutions, and decarbonization of shipping into nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, and of course, the broader climate strategies. So colleagues, allow me to share with you some of UNEP's projects related to the priorities of UNOC3. The first one is a flagship initiative, which probably some of you know, the Regional Seas Program, which addresses the degradation of oceans and coastal areas through regional cooperation. It encompasses 18 regions, each with its own regional seas conventions and action plans. These frameworks tackle issues such as marine pollution, biodiversity loss, and sustainable development, involving not only governments, but also scientific communities, civil societies, and local stakeholders. And under the Regional Seas Program, UNEP promotes inclusive and coherent ocean governance by integrating science, policy, and partnerships. The second is UNEP's support to the development of a sustainable blue economy by balancing economic growth with marine ecosystem protection. This program aids countries in harnessing ocean resources for livelihoods and job creation, while ensuring at the same time long-term economic resilience and environmental sustainability. The third is the Marine and Land-Based Pollution Program, which leads the efforts to address pollution from both land-based and marine-based sources, including, of course, plastic pollution. By integrating science, policy, and partnerships, UNEP works to protect marine ecosystems by tackling the issues like agricultural runoff, industrial waste, and oil spills. Another project is the Green Fins Initiative, established by UNEP and the Reef World Foundation, which promotes sustainable marine tourism by implementing environmental friendly guidelines for diving and snorkeling in industries and operating in countries across Southeast Asia and the Caribbean. Colleagues, the role of faith-based communities as moral and spiritual stewards of the planet is invaluable in addressing the ocean crisis. Across religions, traditions, the ocean is seen as a sacred gift, a source of sustenance, healing, and deep spiritual significance. Faith-based organizations have historically played a crucial role in community-driven conservation, ethical resource management, and education on environmental responsibility. So as we approach UNOC3, UNEP encourages religious leaders and faith groups to support policy and grassroots efforts that protect vulnerable coastal communities, particularly SIDS, which face existential threats from rising sea levels and climate change. We also call for incorporating ocean stewardship into faith-based teachings and mobilize congregations for marine conservation. And finally, advocate for ethical and sustainable economic practices, ensuring that marine resources are used responsibly. So UNEP remains committed to catalyzing action for sustainable blue future. The 2025 Ocean Conference must deliver concrete commitments, innovative financing mechanisms, and strengthen partnerships to protect our marine ecosystems for current and future generations. We cannot afford to delay. Our oceans, our climate, and our communities depend on decisive collective action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yad, for a powerful call and a reminder of why we're all here and why we need to bring our entire communities as well to this conversation. And I think one person and also tradition that is, I think, responding to that call in a powerful way is the Anglican Communion in many different forms. And I'm honored to introduce Martha Jarvis, who serves as the UN representative for the Anglican Communion. Martha, drawing from your experience representing a global faith community at the UN, could you share examples of successful faith-based advocacy for ocean conservation and how communities such as those joining today can effectively prepare for a meaningful participation at UNOC3 rather than just showing up in numbers? Martha, over to you.
Thanks so much, Tarek. That's a great question, and I've so appreciated hearing from the other panelists today. There's always more to learn in this space, and I've learned so much from hearing from everyone. Thank you also to everyone who's joining. Really good to be with you. So as Tarek said, the Anglican Communion is just one of the faith communities that is doing a lot around a response to oceans and a response to climate change and biodiversity loss more broadly. For those of you who don't know, the Anglican Communion is a network, a family of churches that stretches around 165 countries worldwide. And as a result, those churches are experiencing crises and challenges and issues in many, many different ways. And our role is to surface some of those issues so that they can inform international debates and policy dialogue, either in key political centres or in UN processes. And generally that looks like responses to conflict, to refugee movements, and to climate disasters. And on that final area, historically, we have slipped into quite a land-focused approach to our work around climate change. Predominantly, we're talking about extraction, and we're talking about agriculture adaptation that is impacting our communities, and disasters that are hitting urban areas and changing patterns of life where there is a lot that's built up that is suddenly changing. And it's I think an easy area to focus on around the land, but it neglects 2/3 of our incredible planet, this wonderful creation. And there are so many Anglican churches, so many communities around the world who have been working tirelessly around the ocean and drawing that life and strength from it, and also seeing the urgency of needing to respond more broadly to these global issues of climate change, biodiversity loss, through that connection with the ocean. And so much more recently, we have tried to reprioritize our focus on the oceans. And that means engaging in a different way in the conference coming up in Nice this year. But it also means integrating how we talk about the oceans into all of our work around biodiversity loss and climate change. And I thought to tell you more, it would be helpful to hear from someone who has been working on this for many years, who has lived and breathed a very different perspective on the ocean and on climate disasters. So we have joining us today Elisiva Sunia. I've worked with Elisiva over the last year. She came with us to the biodiversity negotiations in Colombia last year, COP16, and I've seen some of her work in action around Fiji. So Elisiva, we would love to hear your perspective on this and how your communities are responding. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha. Hello, everyone. My name is Elisiva. In this side of the world, how we greet is we say Malo Elele. It is indeed a blessing for me to join this webinar on the Faves for UNOC3 campaign. Today, I will be speaking from both a Pacific Indigenous and a Christian view. And also from the lived experiences of my people, where the ocean is not only our lifeblood, but also our sacred storybook. In many Pacific cultures, the ocean is not a boundary, it is a home. It connects our islands, holds our histories, and sustains our future. As Indigenous people, we use the ocean as kin, as ancestors. It speaks to us in waves and tides, in fish migration and coral colorings. As Christian, we see ocean as part of God's creation, made not for exploitation, but for flourishing. Genesis reminds us of the deep over which the Spirit of God hovered, the waters that brings forth life and which reflects the vastness of God's mystery. These two views are not in conflict, but they reinforce each other and they shape how we respond to the change we see in our ocean today with the rising seas, the dying reefs, the salt intrusion, and the displaced families. In the Tonga Episcopal Unit, under the Diocese of Polynesia, we launched the Safe and Resilient campaign using a framework known as the Community Integrated Vulnerability Assessment Framework and combine it with a mapping toolkit known as the GIS Mapping Toolkit. This was not just data collection, it was storytelling through maps, it was prayerful listening through interviews. It was a sacred work. What we did is that we assessed families on what we called household security objectives, things like security of place, where we ask if their homes are safe from storms and sea level rise. Other human security objective are food and water security, where we attend to ask them, can you still fish? Can you do farming? Can you still drink safely? And others are energy and income. And importantly, is the disaster preparedness. Whether are they spiritually and practically ready? Across our 4 Anglican parishes in Tonga, the youth lead this charge. They mapped low-lying areas, identified where the elderly and people with disabilities live, and assessed the strength of church buildings for evacuation use. It was community-led, faith-filled, and rooted in Indigenous awareness of place. One lesson we've learned in that climate vulnerability is not just physical, it is spiritual and communal. You cannot separate a flooded garden from a disrupted prayer life. You cannot separate a lost coastline from a lost songline. So what we offer is a model of faith-rooted resilience. We pray with our feet, walking the land to assess risk. We map with our hearts, not just with software, and we respond in community, not in isolation. So as a Christian, we are called to care for God's creation. As Pacific people, we are called to honor our ancestors. And as a climate vulnerable communities, we are called to lead with courage, with compassion, and with conviction. the ocean is not just where the crisis is, it is also where the solution are. Let us not only speak for the ocean, let us speak with it from our faith, from our roots, and with each other. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me in this space. I think that is all for me.
Thank you so much, Siva. It's beautiful and powerful, and the work that you're doing across the Pacific is transformative. So thank you for being with us. It's nearly 3 a.m. for Siva, so I think we're going to say thank you and good night. But we can take questions afterwards, I'm sure. And just to draw out how the Anglican Communion takes some of this national and regional work that happens and draws it out to UN and global level advocacy. The lessons that we draw from people who are working on the front lines of oceans change and oceans resilience and restoration, like Siva, I think show us so much about the changes that are needed globally, not just because they grasp the urgency of the threat in a different way, but because of the coordinated advocacy that they're able to do around particular targeted issues. So I think I'm right in saying that originally it was the Pacific Conference of Churches with some scientists in the region and a few other civil society, perhaps faith groups in the Pacific who worked with the Pacific Forum of Nations, and then with the Small Island Developing States, and then with the least developed group of countries, and then with all member states, finally to bring the 1.5 to stay alive target into the Paris Agreement. And it's that kind of advocacy that comes from the national level, from the lived experience, that can really begin to shape our policies with something that is ambitious but also realistic, or at least it was at the time of the Paris Agreement. And I think the other way we can take so much from what we see in places like the Pacific and people responding from the front lines is around the changes that are needed in our own patterns of life, and the integration that Siva talked about in terms of the whole human and understanding the interventions that we make in this space to be both spiritual and physical, to be scientific and to be hopeful. And to really see that the shifts that are needed are not just in monitoring the vulnerability, like Siva said, but in changing how we understand metrics of development, changing what we aim for in terms of a good life, and how that then impacts the environment around us and how we understand life to the full, a thriving life. And again, the Pacific Conference of Churches has done huge amounts of work on metrics going beyond GDP to measure a lot of the growth that we are aiming for in our world, to be more sustainable and more honouring of the oceans around us. So thank you once again, Siva, and I'm going to hand back to Tarek.
Thank you so much, Mata. Thank you so much, Siva. And Siva, what you shared on, I think, mapping with our hearts, not just the software, is, I think, a reminder for all of us in this work that can get obviously overly technical, can feel overly technical. I think reminds us what this is about. Thank you both for those powerful examples. And I'd also maybe just like to highlight acknowledging that we have many different traditions as well on this call, many different spiritual families. And I think this is just obviously one that is doing incredible work on the ground, and acknowledging that many of you already are and doing, and I think we wish we could highlight every single one today on this call, but please rest assured there will be many other opportunities as well for this kind of storytelling and sharing. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we're able to jump as well to questions as well. So we would love to have your questions either into the chat, or if you'd like to ask a question as well to one of the panelists, or indeed provide a reflection as well on your work and in this work, please do raise your hand and I'll call on you. I know we have one already from Vincent directed to Jonathan. Vincent is asking, dear Jonathan, what is meant by low carbon food from the ocean? Carbon capture and burying them in the ocean is not healthy to the ocean. So maybe just a clarification question on that part for you, Jonathan.
Sure, thanks. That's a really good question, and happy to have others weigh in on it as well. But I think, as a general matter, what the suggestion here is that many wild caught or even aquaculture forms of seafood, and in particular seafood that are sources of protein, has a much lower carbon footprint than, say, terrestrial sources of protein, beef, lamb, etc. And so, you know, I think there are opportunities both to more sustainably use these small wild-caught fish and other aquaculture seafood resources to help reduce the carbon footprint of the protein demand that we have. And so I think, you know, things like mussels and oysters, sardines, anchovies, there are real opportunities to more sustainably use those, and also then in some cases around mussels, oysters, seaweed, etc., to increase their growth in regenerative aquaculture and increase the protein contribution that they have to nutritional demands of coastal communities and others. There are, of course, some seafood options, in particular those that rely on, as I mentioned earlier, fish meal and fish oil, so salmon aquaculture, et cetera, that are not particularly carbon friendly or offer ways to reduce the carbon footprint of seafood and protein demand. So I think there are some fine details embedded in that, but as a general matter, I think most of the wild caught seafood and a number of these opportunities to increase aquaculture done correctly have real carbon benefits.
So much, Jonathan, and Vincent, if there's a follow-up as well on that, please do share again into the chat. Thanks so much. Hand over to you, Simon. Simon from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and please feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Tariq, and also Gopal. Good to see you both, and thanks for hosting this space. Really, I'm really taking away the message of the importance of integrating oceans into our wider work, and I'm really happy to see you making the connections to the environment and the climate conversations. But I do have a question. You know, when you're looking at some of the causes, and this is my perspective from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, is to explore how looking at some of the drivers and some of the causes of this decline and the need for, obviously, for protection in our economic systems. And so just some reflections on the importance of making those connections in terms of both the over extraction and exploitation of natural resources, including the oceans, but also the waste, the waste of resources and the waste that gets thrown and then thrown out, and the pollution that's generated from the way we design, produce, and consume in our economic systems. So that didn't come up, but I think it's a really important connection also to make, and I'm wondering whether we can join forces in that, but also bring faith perspectives on that connection into the conversation around economic systems change. So it may be too much to deal with in the short time we have here, but maybe for later and ongoing conversations as well, Tariq and Gopal.
Thank you so much, Simon. And I wonder if anyone has reflections to that.
Well, Tariq, if I agree, I mean, of course, this is a very complicated and complex question, and indeed, it is very important to address. And Simon, you mentioned a number of interrelated manners or issues, economic, the degradation and overutilization and over extraction, the exploitation, the waste. all of these are essential matters and are being addressed by different organizations and different players. Specifically from UNEP's perspective, we have a UN multi-agency group working on demining or sustainable mining and considering deep sea mining and so on. We have another group, a global group working on waste reduction and circular economy. We have an alliance on green economy approaches and strategies working with governments. So each area that you have mentioned is very important and requires a lot of joint efforts to address. And this is exactly, at least from our side, we're trying to address them. But of course, we would be happy to discuss that further in other areas and other conversations. Thank you.
And Jonathan?
Thank you. Yeah, Simon, I think you raised some really good points, and there are some economic system-wide changes that need to be looked through. And you know, one of those in particular is just the harmful subsidy payments that governments put out every year that end up in the overexploitation and overcapitalization of global fisheries, and also end up in reprioritizing fisheries that run counterproductive to food and nutrition and development and equity and justice issues for coastal communities. I think there's been estimates that maybe as much as $35 billion a year in payments go out from governments in harmful subsidies to fishing fleets, i.e. these payments are going to increase the number of fishing vessels that are out there, increase damaging fishing practices, bottom trawling and other types of indiscriminate gear, and then also are increasing the take of resources for industrial purposes that really have strong reliance by coastal communities for nutrition and local livelihoods, and so at the expense of both these large subsidies and a few small jobs that they generate, we're seeing large-scale impacts in terms of the damage to the resources themselves, but also damage to the large number of communities and people that depend on those resources day to day.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll also add, Simon, as a final maybe note, we're, as part of this work, and I'll speak as well a little bit longer about this in a moment, we're going to be producing a number of policy primers, and one of them is on a blue moral economy. And also, what does it look like to have in that moral economy approach that I know the Wellbeing Economy Alliance focuses on within this context, and to have blue moral economies embedded moral and spiritual values into these economic activities around these very specific ocean themes that Jonathan, Ayad, Martha, and Isiva has talked about. So we'll share that with you and look forward to having maybe another conversation specifically about that. Also, I think it was Gopal. I don't know, Gopal, if you also wanted to say something as well to this or another thing. Gopal, maybe over to you before we close.
Thank you, Tariq. Well, as people who know me, I always have something to say, whether it's helpful or not. That's another question. But in the interest of time, I'll just thank Jonathan, Iyad, Martha, Elisiva for all of your wonderful remarks. And we're just getting going with this campaign, Phase 2 UNOC3, and we're very keen to stay connected in the lead up to UNOC and to see how we can leverage that to build a broader, longer movement around faiths and oceans. So just very delighted to be joined by all of you and to have the opportunity to convene this space. But Tariq, I'll hand it over to you to close us out.
Yeah, great. I'll ask Wesley as well to share in the chat some of these links as well, so you have access to them directly, to just share what's coming up for the next month in relation to engaging with this wider campaign. One is a multi-faith ocean declaration. So this is a unified statement from diverse traditions that we presented at UNOC3 in Nice. It's currently being developed with the likes of the Anglican Communion and a multi-faith coalition. It'll be ready for signature and support on the week of the 5th of May. So you can stay updated on the newsletters we'll be sharing with you as well on our website when that is ready. I mentioned this as well, Simon, we're going to be producing a number of primers for faith engagement. So resources that you can share amongst your organizations and your communities on the key UNOC themes, policy areas, negotiation areas, as well as border issues such as the blue moral economy, and also some inner principles as well for ocean conservation. And we hope these primers will support you in one, sensitizing your organizations to this work in relation to one, the UN process, but also what does this look like beyond. We're also producing a number of case studies as well. So we're going to be launching a faith ocean conservation report that will highlight the work around the world, such as Elisivas and others that are doing this work on the intersection of faith and oceans, whether it be small or large scale. So if you have your own case studies from your congregations, your communities, please do submit case studies by April 28th to us on oceans.faith/survey. If you have any also inspiring examples you've come across from other traditions, please do point them to us as well. And we're collating as many of these to show what faith-based ocean action can, should, and does look like. There was also a question on faith participation in the panels. So in one of the links Wesley has shared is a way for you to check your accreditation status. So I know we've had a number of questions around accreditation. For those that have been accredited before to some UN conferences, you are automatically accredited to the UN Oceans Conference. But of course, following that, there'll be a specific registration process where then the Secretariat will need to allocate badges, and that process hasn't opened yet. So one, you can check your accreditation status and look at identifying a faith representative, should you be accredited, or obviously a sister and brother organization. And I think that'll end up being determining where and how we can also lobby and advocate for greater faith participation on panels. I also want to note, and I see such as Blair Nelson from Water Spirit as well on the call, that there are other faith-specific coalitions and congregations mobilizing around the UN Oceans Conference who will also be trying to participate as well in many of these panels and campaigns and other activities. Green Zone applications are also open. So if you're not able to attend the Blue Zone, whether through accreditation or others, this will be a more expanded Green Zone compared to other UN conferences on oceans. So applications are open for Green Zone side events in many different forms. So please do visit the form to apply directly. And we also do welcome collaborative efforts and applications. So if you want to consider applying with another organization or indeed through this campaign together, please do email us at crew@oceans.faith over the next few days with any of your ideas for side events. And then finally, in the lead up to the conference, we'll be hosting further webinars, dialogues, and as well as sharing resources such as the primers, the reports, and others on our websites at ocean.faith. So please do stay updated there, and we'll add you to our mailing list based on this webinar. You're welcome to, as always, unsubscribe as you wish, but we assume there is some interest as well from this and also in entering your details into the Zoom. So we'll make sure to keep you updated on all that we're doing, as well as also making sure that we highlight the fantastic work that other coalitions and faith groups are doing in the lead up to UNOC3. With that, I see we're out of time. If you have any questions for us in particular, any ideas or suggestions of how we can support all of you in engaging in the UN Oceans Conference and beyond, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll make sure as well to share this recording so you can forward it to your colleagues who couldn't attend today. And with that, I'd like to give a big thank you to all our speakers today, Jonathan, Iyad, Martha, Siva, and to all of you for joining today, for your interest, for your care, and for your questions. Thank you, everyone, and God bless. Ma salam.